Bill Morse is proof that one man can make a difference. Eschewing a well-earned and comfortable retirement, he moved from the United States to Cambodia to do what he could to help the people there heal from the wounds of war. He founded the Landmine Relief Fund, which works to remove landmines and unexploded ordnance left over from years of conflict. The Cambodian countryside is littered with landmines, cluster bombs, and other unexploded weapons affecting every province due to the conflicts between the Khmer Rouge, the governments of Cambodia and Vietnam. This widespread presence of landmines and other explosive items is causing death and injury and restricting land access. Unexploded bombs continue to be a particular danger, and a massive cluster bomb problem haunts the east of the country.
We are here in beautiful Cambodia. I'm with Bill Morse. He is the president of the Landmine Relief Fund, as well as the International Projects Director for the Cambodian Self Help De-mining organization. Bill, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, the first thing people are going to ask is, what is this behind us?
This behind us is what we in the Army would call a deuce and a half. It's a 2.5 ton U.S. Army truck. This one happened to be built in 1984, but this is the kind of truck that the U.S. Army used throughout Vietnam. We had them in our inventory up until, the early 2000s. I bought this from a place in Philadelphia that rebuilds U.S. Army vehicles because I couldn't find a truck to move the demining team from its headquarters out to the minefields.
Well, we're here at the Landmine Museum, located just outside of Siem Reap in beautiful Cambodia. But before you came here, tell us, where were you born and where were you raised?
I was born in Jamestown, New York, just south of Buffalo. I went to primary school in Fort Worth, Texas, and then we moved to Southern California, and I went to junior high school and high school in Palos Verdes, California. My first 2 years of college were at Kemper Military School in Missouri. I was going to be a career soldier. I finished up at Kemper. I transferred to TCU. I was commissioned in December of 1970, and the Army at that point had too many officers. We were popping out second lieutenants like popcorn. So instead of going into the Army as a career, I wound up in the Army for 92 days. So I got out of the Army, taught school for a while. At that point, I had become an anti-war activist. So we were in Georgia. I helped start the George McGovern campaign in Georgia in 1972. Ultimately moved back to California, went into business, and had worked for businesses, had a couple of my own businesses, and we sold our last business in 1998. Lived in Palm Springs.
Now, at that point in your life, you'd been a successful businessman, doing pretty nice, living in Palm Springs, on the edge of what should have been a nice retirement. But unfortunately, somebody came to you in 2003 and asked you for $100.
A buddy of mine, well, when I first retired, I was 50 years old. I was going to take 6 months and sit around the pool at home and go play golf with my dad. And the first day I was retired, my wife came home. She was a school teacher. Walked in the house and went, "Hi, honey, what's for dinner?" And I went, "I got to find a job. I got to do something." So I started a consulting company. I worked for a company that made police boats and fire boats. That was a lot of fun. My job was to take jet skis on steroids out in Long Beach Harbor and shoot them around and sell them around the United States. One of the guys I worked with came to me and said, "Give me $100. And I said, "What for?" And he said, "I met a guy in Cambodia who's clearing landmines with a stick and a screwdriver, and I want to raise enough money so that he can buy a black market mine detector in Thailand." And I looked at him and said, "You buying this whole story?" And he went, "Yeah, I was there. I saw him." I got online, read everything I could about him. Jill and I looked at each other and said, "You know what? We got to meet this guy." You know, I knew what happened in Cambodia. The Vietnam War was my war. It was what the war my generation fought, and I had followed the aftermath of the war and all of the things that had happened in the countries surrounding Vietnam, particularly Laos and Cambodia. And so I wanted to see what was going on here. So we got on a plane, we came to Cambodia, walked into the the original Landmine Museum found Aki Ra. I asked him how much it cost him to run his program for a month, and he said, I don't know. And I said, you've got 18 kids living with you. You clear landmines when you can find them. You've been doing this for 10 years. You got to have some idea. And he said, you mean buy the food, send the kids to school, buy them clothes, and go out in a taxi to clear landmines? And I said, yeah. And he said, $462. I went back to the people we were traveling with, raised $1,000, came back to Aki Ra and said, here's $1,000. I'll give you $500 a month for your program. And he looked at me and rolled his eyes. And I said, you heard this before. He was very diplomatic and said, yeah, people see what we're doing and their reactions are very heartfelt, but they have a family, they have children, they have a job, and when they get home, they have other obligations. And I said, Aki Ra, I can do $500 a month. I can shame my friends out of $500 a month. We'll do this. So we started the program. 2007, the government told him he had to stop clearing landmines in his unauthorized manner. He had to get a license from the government. So he asked me if I would help him get a license. He said, I want to call it Cambodian Self Help De-mining. I said, okay. So I came over here. We thought it would take a couple of months.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. When you first came over and met Aki Ra, who was the person for which the $100 was for, what did you know about Cambodia and about landmines?
Well, I had, I having been in the Army, I knew a bit about landmines. I was a military policeman. I mean, mostly what I knew was stop the traffic and don't, stay away from the landmines. I knew what we had done to Cambodia. I was aware of the Khmer Rouge. I followed all that. I was very political when I was younger. I worked for George McGovern in 1972. I worked for a lot of other people after that. I was disgusted with my generation, with all of those people who had marched in the streets and opposed the war. And as soon as it wasn't, pardon my language, as soon as it wasn't my ass on the ground, I didn't give a damn about anybody else. We destroyed this country. I mean, we did horrible, horrible things to Cambodia. We created the Khmer Rouge. We supported the Khmer Rouge after they were overthrown by the Vietnamese. We have an obligation to this country, and our obligation is generational. It's not going to be solved in 10 or 15 or 20 years. It's going to be solved in 25, 50, 75 years, and we have an obligation to do that. So I wanted to see what we could do.
The Khmer Rouge and the U.S. involvement in supporting them, it's something that nobody back in the States has ever heard of. What did you learn about that?
I got online and read about it. I mean, I knew about it when it was going on. When the Khmer Rouge captured the country in April of 1975, they ran it for 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days. They had run areas of Cambodia, particularly the north central part of Cambodia. They'd been in power there for a long time. The reports of Khmer Rouge atrocities were coming out before the Khmer Rouge ever took over. A lot of the reports were coming out of Vietnam. But we couldn't trust what the Vietnamese said. I mean, they're communists.
They're the enemy.
They just kicked their ass in a war. Yeah, you can't trust the Vietnamese. We don't. Well, then the reports started coming out of other places, and we started realizing what was going on. We didn't do anything while the Khmer Rouge were in power. When the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia, the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, condemned the Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia, and I'm paraphrasing, but as the overthrow of a sovereign state. It's ludicrous. And then we supported the Khmer Rouge for 10 years. They held their seat in the United Nations till 1992. The Khmer Rouge were supported with materially with weapons through Thailand. The refugee camps in Thailand became base camps for the Khmer Rouge to go in against the Pol Pot, hid in Thailand for years. The Vietnamese ultimately left. The Cambodian army continued to fight the Khmer Rouge. In 1992, there were United Nations held elections. The United Nations Transition Authority, Cambodia, had come in. They held elections in 1992. A government was put in place. The Khmer Rouge were kicked out of the United Nations, and the world recognized the government here. But they still fought the Khmer Rouge until 1998. It wasn't until 1998 that the last of the Khmer Rouge surrendered and came into the fold. When Khmer Rouge soldiers were captured, they weren't thrown in prison, their weapons weren't taken away, and they be sent home. They were incorporated into the Cambodian army. They took an oath to the government, and we didn't create a guerrilla army out of the ex-Khmer Rouge guys. They simply became part of the Cambodian military.
Now, this is the backdrop to you coming in the early 2000s. So what is then the scope of the issues of the landmines that you were confronting at that time?
The government had gone out and done a number of surveys around the country to figure out where the minefields were. The farmers, the villagers, they'd figured out where the minefields were. You know, the government came in, they did a major survey in the early 2000s. I think the last survey they did was in 2011. You know, simply put, they would go into a village and say, "Do you have a minefield here?" People would go, "Yeah, we've got one, you know, right over there." So, well, are you sure? Yeah, we're very sure. You can go walk through it for yourself and figure it out. We've identified the minefields. So the government went about setting up a process whereby those minefields would be cleared. We have a plan here in Cambodia now to have the recognized minefields cleared by the end of 2025.
So when you came here, was there an estimate of how many landmines are still out there to be?
There are any number of estimates on how many landmines are out there, and every single one of them is what a military term called WAG, which, yeah.
I know what that means.
Yeah, wild ass guess. Nobody counted the landmines coming in. Nobody counted them going in the ground. They don't do that. They do that in the movies. There's some 18-year-old kid with a grid putting all them. That doesn't happen.
So who was laying the landmines?
The landmines were laid primarily by the Vietnamese army, the Cambodian army, and the Khmer Rouge. The Americans laid landmines in Cambodia. We laid landmines along the Vietnam-Cambodian border because we would get into a firefight with the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, or with the Viet Cong, and they would retreat into Cambodia, and we would chase them across the border until some poor second lieutenant had a map and said, "Oh, damn, we're in Cambodia, we got to go home." We put a lot of landmines on that border to both keep the NVA from coming into Vietnam and to mess them up when they were trying to go back. But most of the landmines in Cambodia are in the north central part of the country. They're along the Thai border. It's a big mine belt called K5 that runs the entire length of Cambodia along the Thai border. We're still clearing that. That was put in by the Vietnamese to keep the Khmer Rouge from going into Thailand, picking up guns and weapons and coming back. There were landmines laid on the Thai side. The Thais were trying to keep people out. We have what we call CMAC here, the Cambodia Mine Action Center. In Thailand, they have TMAC, the Thai Mine Action Center. We've got landmines in Laos, or we call it Laos. We're still clearing landmines in Vietnam. A lot of the landmines in Vietnam are American landmines laid by Americans and Australians and the others who were over there. But the landmines here were predominantly laid by the Khmer Rouge, the Vietnamese, and the Cambodian army.
And there's also the issue of unexploded ordnance.
That's the real problem here today.
And what is that?
Unexploded ordnance is all of those artillery rounds and mortar rounds that were fired and never went off. The 20 to 30% of everything shot and fired doesn't work. It just hits the ground and goes bounce. There's not a lot of quality control in weapons manufacturing because nobody calls you up and goes, "Ha, ha, ha, it didn't work, come do it again."
Right.
So a lot of that stuff doesn't work. And then there's a lot of stuff that is buried in the ground to be recovered at a later date, or you're just trying to hide it from the enemy and it's never found. And then ultimately some farmer is expanding his field. Some kids are on their way to school and it's been raining and they find something in the ground. That's where the unexploded ordnance comes. A lot of it is just random landmines. You and I are running down the road and we're being chased, so we stop for 2 minutes and we put a bunch of landmines in the ground. It's not really a minefield, but it's going to stop, it's going to slow the enemy down when he's chasing you. Well, that stuff lays there until somebody finds it. most of our injuries today in Cambodia come from unexploded ordnance, not from minefields.
And even though it didn't explode initially, it still can.
Oh, absolutely. We, in January of 2022, we had an EOD team, an explosive ordnance disposal team, that was had been called out to look at a Russian anti-tank mine, and it was booby-trapped, and it blew up and killed 3 of our guys.
How is it booby-trapped?
When you've got an anti-tank mine, if you were to look at one here, on one side of it, there's a like a bottle cap. That's where the TNT is pumped in. On the other side, it is rigged to have a booby trap, and if you hit that booby trap, it sets off the detonation. And our guys accidentally
Came in the wrong
hit
side.
it. We're on the wrong side, and it blew him to pieces. One guy, we only found part of his thumb and a little bit of his skull.
Well, tell us about the organization that you developed to remedy this.
Well, I started a group in the United States called the Landmine Relief Fund, and our objective is to be one of the many groups in Cambodia that are clearing landmines now. We started helping Aki Ra.
And who is Aki Ra?
Aki Ra was a child soldier. He was born in 1970. He was stolen from his family when he was 5. He became a child soldier when he was 10 or 11. When you were big enough to carry a rifle, you became a soldier. So I asked him one day, when they gave you a rifle, were you scared? And he said, no, it was fun. And he said, no, it was fun. People had to do what I told them to do. So if you can imagine a world run by angry 12-year-old boys with AK-47s and hand grenades, that's what parts of Cambodia were like in the late 70s and in the 80s and even into the 1990s. He was captured by the Vietnamese. He was given the option of either fighting with the Vietnamese or being shot. And 2 of his friends were shot. And so when they came to him and said, do you want to defect? He was, oh, hell yes, I'll do it right now. He fought with the Vietnamese until they left. Then he went to work clearing landmines. He figured out he was good at it, and he started going out on his own clearing landmines. He found a lot of wounded and orphaned kids, young men, boys, and he brought them to his house to live, and he and his wife took care of them. When I met him, he had 18 kids living with him. Probably half of them were orphans. All of them were landmine victims.
Well, take us through the progression. You come here, and eventually you come here to stay. That was a big commitment. Why?
Well, when we first came over here, it was only going to be to meet Aki Ra. We started supporting his organization. He asked me to help him start a de-mining organization. I came over here. It took us a year to get a license for him, a very, very difficult year to get the license. My wife was a school teacher. The Landmine Museum had an English language program that was horrible. They'd get volunteers to come in for 3 weeks, and they'd teach the kids the ABCs. And then a new group of volunteers would come in, and they taught the kids the ABCs. So we had kids who knew the ABCs really, really well, but they couldn't speak a word of English. She set up an English language program.
And she being
my wife, who was sitting over here behind the camera. I worked with Aki Ra to set up the administrative end of it. I had a couple of businesses. Well, we decided to stay for 2 years. 2009 came, and we stayed another year, and then another year. And we would go home in the summertime, and we had a house in Palm Springs. We had a 3,500 square foot house on a golf course with a swimming pool and all that stuff. And we would go home, and it was nice to be home. And we'd go lay down by the pool, go see my mom and dad. And after about a week, it was like, I don't want to be here. So we finally had dinner with my mom and dad one night, and they were in their late 80s. And we said, we're thinking about making a change. And they said, what? I said, well, we're thinking about moving to Cambodia permanently. And if any of you are from California, we were at Ruby's. So my mom put her silverware on the table and folded her hands and looked at me and said, well, it's about time. I said, you're okay with this? And she said, your heart's over there, it's not here. So we...
Well, let me stop you right there, because that's something that's... You get the hook for $100.
Mm-hmm.
You get interested and you see what was happening, and you have some history from your youth about the Vietnamese War and the Cambodian conflict. You come here and on and off to start helping, but that's a big commitment going from living in the States and assisting to picking up stakes, changing your entire life, making a really good pitch to Jill to come here, and starting a whole new life. I mean, what was it about Cambodia and this issue that caught you?
I have always, my politics are quite liberal. I have always, in the back of my mind, in the back of my heart, wondered why we walked away from the situation we created here. And secondly, I was in my 60s at the time, and I had a lot left to do. And I think people who retire have maybe not an obligation, but certainly the opportunity to mentor other people and to give back from what they have learned. And there's a lot that I have been able to accomplish over here by mentoring other people and helping other people learn how to do what I learned how to do. I don't run programs over here. I help people learn how to run programs over here. My strength as a manager is that I don't micromanage. I give someone a job, I explain what I want done, and then I leave them alone to do it. Now, my weakness as a manager is that I don't micromanage. So a lot of times people will fall down, but you have to fall down to learn. I've had too many bosses who every time you made a wrong turn, they would correct you. Well, you don't learn anything then. You simply learn to follow what people tell you to do.
You wrote an article. It's on your LinkedIn page. It's time to pay back.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
It is time for our generation to pay back, to pay forward. We have a lot to give. What do you do when you retire? You're going to sit around and wait for the stroke to come? There's no way to live the rest of your life. I had a beautiful house. I'm on a golf course with a swimming pool, and I got a nice dog, and my wife works. I mean, I'm home all alone all day long with nothing to do except relax. And I was going out of my mind. I said, I might just as well, pick up a gun and, put it up to my head and pull the trigger, because that's all I'm waiting for. I'm just waiting for the end to come. And there's a lot more that I can do. It is time for our generation to pay back from what we have received. Pay back or give back.
And it seems that you and Jill have embarked on quite an adventure. I mean, you're in an exotic country in Cambodia. What have you learned about Cambodia and its people?
The culture is extremely different over here. So there's a lot of things. One of the first things we learned, we had a very good friend of ours who was getting married. She asked our permission to get married. She was doing some things with her family, and I said, your parents, the obligation is from your parents to you. They're the ones who brought you into this world. Your parents have an obligation to help you. And she said, no, I have an obligation to care for my parents. There's a couple of girls who live at our house with us, and they have told us, when we get old, I'm going to take care of you. We don't do that in America. We put our parents into retirement communities, into rehab facilities, but we don't bring them home and take care of them. This is a very close-knit society. It's a small country. It's only got 16 million people. There's fewer people in Cambodia than there are in Southern California. The country is the size of the state of Missouri. It's a very modest country. It's a very conservative country. We took some friends to Venice Beach, and two young ladies, because they had an offshore and it was probably 75 and they're wrapped up in like 6 towels, you know. They thought it was going to snow. But they're looking down on the beach and the girls are all in thongs. And they looked at me and said, do their mothers know they dress like that? And I said, well, they weren't dressed like that when they left home, but they were when they came out of the dressing room. And she said, why does everybody here want to be tan, want to be dark? I mean, in Cambodia, one of the most popular things you can find in a store is whitening cream. It's all throughout Asia. People want their skin to be white. And I said, because the only people in the West who can afford to be tan are people who are rich and can lay out around the beach and around the pool all day long. Well, this young lady had been working on the demining team. She had come back home one day, and her grandmother looked at her and said, where have you been? You look like a peasant.
I noticed that when we were traveling in eastern Cambodia is that there's a real, I don't know if it's a caste system, a prejudice, but based on skin color.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The lighter your skin is, the higher you are regarded. Because if your skin is light, you must be educated. You have a job in the office. It's not a caste system like India,
right,
but it's more of a social caste. But then there are women who just they have westernized themselves. Yeah, there's a lot of progress going on here. A lot of people, you get people who come back and say, oh, I liked it so much the way it used to be. And you would go out to the village and the people lived, you know, they lived such a simple life. And I said, stop, don't ennoble their poverty.
Yeah.
You know, would you go live in a village with no toilet, drinking water out of a stinking pond, and live in a house that leaks on you all the time? Are you willing to give up your entire life to go live like that? Well, no, well, they don't want to live like that either. So stop it, you know. There has to be progress, and it has to come from the Cambodians. It can't be forced on them.
Absolutely. That's the only way.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
Yeah. Right now, we're down from 1,000 injuries a year to 40 injuries a year.
So when you came here, 1,000 people were being injured a year.
It was, in the 90s, 1,000 people were being injured. I think when we came here, it was well into the mid hundreds, I believe. But we're down to about 40 injuries a year now, 40 casualties a year. That's both injuries and deaths. So it's improved significantly.
A lot of lives saved.
Yeah, I mean, we all thought when we got under 100, that people would start rolling up the demining. We thought the funding would stop. But no one is quite sure what's going to happen after 2025.
But isn't a lot of the demining not just saving lives, but reclaiming land?
Oh, that's primarily what it is.
Yeah, what does
reclaiming land. So we go into a minefield. We do what we call full manual clearance. You can go in with dogs. There are CMAC uses rats. There's 39 rats in Cambodia, so they're not going to clear all the landmines. And they don't clear landmines, they simply find them. You can go in with big machines and clear it. We use mine detectors. We work in a lane. It's 1 meter wide. You put a stick down, put a stick in front of you. You take a weed whacker and cut the grass down. You go over it with a mine detector. If it doesn't make any noise, you move the stick forward. You keep working back and forth like you would mow a yard. If the mine detector does make noise, you get on your hands and knees and you probe for the landmine with like a barbecue skewer. So when Aki Ra taught me to clear landmines, he said, you probe for the landmine like this, or you probe for the landmine like this. You know, if you do it like this, you'll find one. So when you tap something, then you stop and you get a spade and a brush, just like an archaeologist would do. And you go in and you clear the dirt to identify what it is. Now we have cleared in 15 years, we've cleared a few thousand landmines. But what that mine detector may find is a piece of junk because it's a metal detector. Every landmine's got a little bit of metal in it, but it could be a bolt, it could be a Coke can, it could be a screwdriver, it could be anything. We've cleared 1.4 million pieces of fragments of shrapnel. And you clear that as slowly as you clear a landmine.
And then that land can now be used to plant
And
crops.
when that minefield is cleared, it is double checked by the government. The village signs off on it, and we return the land to the village. People ask us, how confident are you that the land is clear? We have never had an injury on a piece of land that we've cleared. I'm unaware of any injury that has ever happened in a cleared minefield by any organization in Cambodia. It probably has, I'm just not aware of it. But once we've cleared it, it's clear, because we go over every square millimeter.
Now, have you yourself gone into the field and searched?
I have.
Take us through that.
I have. Well, we were clearing a minefield, probably 2010. We cleared 700 landmines in this field. And the villagers had cleared about 400 before we got there. So they had just simply walked side by side, poking the ground with a stick, and when they found something, they dug it up and they moved it off to the side. Pick it up like this, you're safe. Pick it up like this, you're not. We were clearing, and Akira handed me, we found something, and Akira handed me the probe, and he said, "You do it." And I said, "Akira, I'm not a deminer." He said, "You wrote the procedures." He said, "You're a level 1 deminer. Level 1 deminer is the guy who goes in and does this." So I went in and I probed, and he's standing over my shoulder. He's watching what I'm doing. So, and I probed, I tapped it, and then I got the brush and I cleared it. When we identified it, then somebody who was a higher level deminer than I came in, and we disposed of the landmine. And we weren't blowing them up at that point because there were too many landmines in the field. So you don't get sympathetic explosions, which it's where you've got the room full of mouse traps with ping pong balls on it. You throw one in and they all go off. You don't get that in a minefield. One landmine blows up and the falling dirt blows all the other landmines. It's Hollywood. But
that's
don't
got to be
start.
pretty intense, especially anytime you're doing a mine.
I wasn't at all nervous. I mean, because number one, I'm not, looking like this. Number two, I've got Akira standing right over my shoulder telling me what to do and what not to do. Now, I've been in a minefield the first time I went out with him, 2004, I guess it was. We were up near the Thai border in Anglong Lang, and we found we had been sleeping in an old Khmer Rouge officer's house. And he told us that there was some mortar rounds out in the field. So we had a mine detector, so we went out and we found it. And the Akira rigged it with some TNT and a fuse, and it literally, lit it with a cigarette. And we all run away and hide, and it goes shh, and the detonator popped, but the TNT never went off. So I'm standing there, and I stood up, and the guy behind me grabs me by my belt and just yanks me back on the ground and said, sometimes it takes a couple of minutes for that TNT to cook off. And if it cooks off, there's going to be a lot of body parts, and we don't want them to be yours.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure Jill was in favor of that.
Well, she was sitting back in Siem Reap waiting for me to come back. And we were tour directors for a tour company at the time. And so we sat there for about another 15 minutes waiting for it to go off, and it didn't. So he rigged it again, and then we were walking out when we heard it go off. But I mean, I've never been in a situation where I was uncomfortable, because I've always been with people who knew what they were doing. We were driving back before we got the license. When we had applied for the license, they had told Akira to stop demining. You can't do anything until you get a license. You're going to get in trouble if you do. But we were out looking at a field that we were going to clear, and it was horrible getting in. It was just really, really hard. It started to rain, and we were there for like 3 days, and the guys are all looking around. Foreigners are called barangs here, and they're all looking around going, what are we going to do with the barang guy? What are we going to do with the old guy? So I'm trying to hide behind something, read my book, or just stay out of their way. Finally, Akira comes over and says, we got to get out of here because it's going to rain. And if it rains like they think it's going to rain, if we don't get out now, we're going to get stuck here for 2 or 3 weeks. So we got in the car, we're going out, we go through a village, and this old guy in a krama, is that scarf that everybody wears. He's got a krama tied around his waist, comes running out and goes, Dak min, you know, me and mine, me and min. I have a mine. So we stopped and we got out and we said, where's the mine? And there's a cut off palm tree about 9 feet tall, and he points to the top. And there's a Russian landmine sitting on the top of this post. And Aki was talking to him, and I went, what the hell is that all about? And he said, well, his kids were playing, they have a game here like jacks. And the kids were playing jacks. And as they scooped up the jacks, they uncovered a landmine. And they knew what it was. Dad had been a Khmer Rouge soldier. They went and got Dad. Dad knew what it was, and he knows he can't leave it there. He dug it up and is like, where the hell can I put this that the kids aren't going to get it? So he climbed up the top of the palm tree, put it up there. It had been there for a year.
Oh, wow.
And Aki Ross said, what should we do? And I said, well, what do you think we should do? And he said, well, I'd blow it up. And I said, I think we should blow it up too. And there's a lot of ways you can blow it. You can fill a water bottle with water, hang it over the branch of a tree, walk away and drop it. You know, there's all kinds of ways to do it. And Akira said, but the government told me if I clear landmines, I'm going to go to jail. And I said, what you do is you blow it up. And then the minute you get home, you call them up, you tell them where you were and what you did. Nobody's going to they're going to get mad at you if you hide it. They're not going to get mad at you if you call them up and tell them what you did. And that's what we did, and man, nobody got in trouble at all. But we've had some weird stuff like that.
What are the lessons? Well, let me ask you this. You've been here now for a number of years. How has it changed you?
How has it changed me? I hope it hasn't changed my core beliefs. I really feel that we, my generation, any generation, anybody who gets old, has an obligation to give things back. I have become much more patient. Jill will disagree with this. Patient, working with a lot of people that I work with. I have become, I think, more understanding. I have been disappointed by things that people I work with have done. In the past, I would have packed it up and walked away. Today, I don't do that. Although a few things have happened that have made it more difficult to finish the work that we want to do. That's life, you know. Shit happens, so you deal with it and you get on with it. I am much more willing or understanding of other people. Anybody can make money. It's not hard to make money. It's hard to make your life mean something. So we don't have any kids of our own. And we've got a lot of people here who we consider our own children. But, you know, I think we have, if we were both to get hit by a runaway truck tomorrow, I think we have started something here that will continue. We expect in the next, 5 to 10 years that we will turn everything that we have over to other people.
Any final thoughts?
The thing I tell people, particularly that I tell people who are younger than me, everybody's younger than me. When I talk to college kids and high school kids, I tell them that the problems we have today are not going to be solved by government. They're not going to be solved by organizations. The problems we have today are going to be solved by you and I. The responsibility for solving the problems here in Cambodia, and I point to these high school kids and I go, the responsibility is yours. I mean, it is not your parents, it is not your grandparents. The responsibility for solving the problems today belongs to you. Now, whether it's landmines or it's the environment or it's, clean food or clean water or whatever, go home, find something that's important to you and become part of it. If you sit back and complain, you're nothing but part of the problem. Become part of the solution. And people our age can do the same thing. We've got a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience. And that experience, we should be giving that experience and knowledge to other people. Not telling them, but teaching them. And there's a lot of organizations in the States. There's a place called, I think it's called CORE, the Congress of Retired Executives. I mean, you can join that, and a guy starts a business and he doesn't know how to do something, he'll come to you, and you can help him set up his accounting department, his sales department, whatever it might be. Give back, and you're going to feel a lot better when you do. I mean, anybody can sit home and read the new John Grisham book, and go jump in the swimming pool, and hang out at the beach, and get skin cancer like a lot of our people our generation are getting right now. But no, become part of the solution. Don't complain. Become involved. Whether it's conservative politics or liberal politics, but become involved.
It's people.
Pardon?
It's people.
It's people. Yeah, you can't not be involved.
Well, Bill, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.